Good evening, everybody. I'm Michael Lewis hanging out here with you live in the Chew Digest studio located at youtube.com. It is Saturday night, March the 21st, and it is warm here in Southern California for March. It has been what I would call rather inclement, not comfortable for the last few days, just because of, I think yesterday a new record was set where we reached up to 99 degrees in March. And I know this is what we signed up for living in Southern California. We live in a desert, so we shouldn't be surprised when this happens from time to time. It's okay. Uh, I, I I'm at the point now though where I wouldn't mind having a few days of rain. Um, I want to say hello to my kids, my grandkids, my great grandkids, and all those future generations that I'm doing these videos for. I'm creating these so that you can know who I am and what I am about, as well as I want to leave a record of about what it is that is important to me throughout my own intellectual pursuit and towards my goal of furthering my education to get to the point where I can better be able to help people. And um, in a sense, this is my daily diary that I can have so that again, when that time comes and technology makes it possible for you guys to create a virtual version of me, that you'll then have that. So what are you going to need? You're going to need views of me from all sides. You're going to need to you know um, you're going to need to have all of the words that I would use and just the way my mind thinks. And so I'm going to continue that journey today. I've had kind of a couple of days off that I took from doing this. I was just kind of uh, I think the heat got to me a little bit, and I was feeling a little bit less than motivated to uh, get back on here. Plus, I had some homework. I started school again this week, and so school is going to be impacting how much I can do this, but that's okay. I mean, I've got the rest of my life, and uh, I don't think YouTube's going anywhere. So, anyways, what I wanted to talk about today is this whole thing cortisol. What is cortisol and how does it affect who we are as human beings? How does it affect our health and our well being? And it is a hormone that um, it is a part of the human system. It is a part of our chemistry that is a means by which our body communicates with us. And now I'm going to get to doing a little bit of reading about what I put together for this, is that most people talk about cortisol like it's something you need to fight, when it's really not. It's actually just, like I mentioned, it's part of who we are, and it's beneficial in that it's trying to push us back in the right direction. You hear it all the time: lower your cortisol, reduce your stress, calm your system down. It sounds right on the surface, right? But it misses something more fundamental, and that is that cortisol isn't the enemy, it's a signal. It's our body's way of stepping in and saying that something about the environment, internal or external, doesn't feel stable, and it needs to be compensated. And so that's where cortisol comes in, and and it begins making subtle shifts in our chemistry that are trying to put our body back into a homeostatic state so it can get back to functioning as normal. And when you start looking at it that way, the conversation shifts. A healthy body doesn't try to eliminate cortisol, it uses it with precision. There's a natural rhythm built into the system. You're meant to wake up in the mornings and experience a rise in cortisol. That's what gives you alertness, it gives you focus, it gives you the ability to get moving. From there, it should gradually taper off as the day goes on, reaching its lowest point at night so that the body can repair, recover, and reset. That rise and fall is what keeps everything functioning smoothly. However, there are a lot of people experiencing a rise in cortisol in the morning, but then it stays elevated all throughout the day, and that's not how it should be functioning. The problem is that most people no longer follow that curve. Instead of a defined rise and a gradual decline, cortisol stays elevated throughout the day. It flattens out, and over time, that constant elevation starts to wear on the system. Energy feels inconsistent, sleep becomes less restorative, and the body never fully settles. It's not that cortisol is doing something wrong, it's that it's being asked to stay active far longer than it was designed to. And that's really where we need to step up our understanding of how this mechanism works within the human body. If you trace it back, cortisol tends to rise for a few specific reasons. The body doesn't trust the timing because the circadian rhythm is off. It doesn't trust the fuel supply blood because the blood glucose is unstable. It doesn't trust fluid balance because electrolytes are out of alignment. The nervous system is constantly stimulated without a real off switch. And sleep didn't restore the system the night before. When those pieces are off, the body responds the only way it knows how. It increases cortisol to stabilize things. In other words, the cortisol production and response by our body is its way of attempting to return us back to a state where the body can do what it needs to do, not what we think is best necessarily. And so when we are running our body outside of its normative function, our body responds to an elevated cortisol level. And that's when we start feeling bad. And that's why the issue isn't really stress, it's the way most people think about it. It's more accurate to call it physiological uncertainty, in that when someone's uncertain, their mind is constantly going from here to there, to this thought, to the others, to worry, to what do I do? And then they stay stuck, and then they oftentimes try to break free from that feeling of staying stuck. And what do? Sometimes they make the wrong decision, go off in the wrong direction, and now they find themselves in an even more uncertain direction, and now they got to make a course correction and more cortisol. And the body is basically just trying to manage unpredictability. So instead of asking how to fight stress, a better question is How do we create an environment that the body recognizes as stable and predictable? Oh goodness, I get that. It's like I want to burp. Um, that process starts early in the day. Getting light exposure is very important. Um, One of the things I do regularly most mornings is I will go walk outside barefoot and I will look around and I'll get some light in my eyes. Um, Other than that, usually within about 30 minutes of waking up, I get up, I use the facilities, I get a glass of orange juice, put some electrolytes in it. I make my bed every day. Do I like doing it? Would I rather just leave it undone? Of course, of course. But you know what? I'd much rather walk into my room and find my bed made than seeing it unmade. There's just something about seeing a bed that's freshly made that makes you feel better, um, leaves you less uncertain, if you will. Um, and so the process starts early in the day. Getting light exposure and moving shortly after waking, it does more than just wakes you up. It tells your brain what time it is. It anchors your internal clock and sets the entire cortisol rhythm in motion. Without that anchor, the body is essentially guessing, and that guesswork carries throughout the rest of the day. And it starts off the day with uncertainty. We need light. I think that's why those of us that live at the lower latitudes end up being a little bit healthier, is because we have a strong anchor floating through the sky that lets us know when and where we are. It's certainty, plain and simple. From there, energy availability becomes a major factor. Cortisol is deeply tied to glucose regulation. When blood sugar drops or fluctuates too much, cortisol rises to bring it back up. What many people experience as stress is often just the body responding to inconsistent energy. Keeping intake steady and predictable reduces the need for that compensation. This doesn't mean that we need to be snacking all day long. That's inherently problematic for a number of reasons. Number one would be for your teeth, your oral health. It's not healthy for your teeth to be exposed to foods all day long. We need to be eating consistently and eating the kinds of foods that stay in our system for longer, that provide us with what you would call steady, sustained energy. And if you're somebody that consumes a vegan diet that is marked by a high fruit diet, for example, more power to you. It's kind of a tough road to hoe. Don't get me wrong; it's tasty. It's really tasty, but you have to eat typically a lot more volume. Number one, number two, you have to eat uh, more regularly, and this can. I'm not saying it necessarily does. There are some people that have exceptionally good teeth, but there are some that don't. And so for those people, they can and sometimes do experience tooth injury and tooth loss as a result of eating a high fruit diet. Uh, there are You can also experience some additional tooth loss from the constant grinding. There are other ways. Uh, like with myself, I tend to take a more omnivorous approach, a diet where the nutrients I'm putting in are more dense, uh, and that require much lower volume, almost what I would call uh, a low or zero residue diet. I have been experimenting with that for some time now, and it seems to make a whole lot more sense for my genetics and my makeup. So, from the point where I left off with light being an anchor, from there, energy availability becomes a major factor. Cortisol is deeply tied to glucose regulation. And like I said, when blood sugar drops or fluctuates too much, cortisol rises to bring it back up. What many people experience as stress is just the body responding to inconsistent energy. Keeping intake steady and predictable reduces the need for compensation. One way to accomplish that steady state of nutrients is if you're somebody, for example, on the other end of the spectrum that eats a more carnivore diet, guess what? You're not going to be as hungry as often. It's going to take you a whole lot longer to get back into that state of being hungry, especially if you eat a high fat version of that diet. Um, Now, I'm not suggesting that's the best diet for everyone. For each individual, there's going to be biochemical differences and genetic factors that define what works best for you, and that's really what you need to consider ultimately when it comes to your food intake. Um, Also, fluid balance plays a similar role. The body operates as a fluid system, and electrolytes, especially sodium and potassium, help maintain the pressure and stability of that system. When those are outside of balance, the body perceives it as a problem that needs to be corrected. Cortisol, along with related hormones, steps in again. So, what looks like a stress response can actually be a response to internal imbalance. And electrolytes are kind of hard to keep in check. I mean, it's not too bad if you're somebody like me that's lactase persistent and can consume dairy products. You can get plenty of calcium that way, some magnesium. You can also take concentrates, minerals, uh, supplements, which will provide you with a lot of um, chloride and magnesium and other trace minerals. But potassium is unless you're eating an all fruit diet all the time, potassium's a little bit of a harder one to get, and salt is one that I find hard to judge because if I get too much sodium, then my body retains and my eyes go, ooh, my feet will get fat. I'll retain water. But if you don't get enough, you can also end up with edema as well. So it's like darned if you do, darned if you don't, and so sometimes it's hard to tell. Well, are my fat pudgy? Are my feet pudgy because I didn't get enough sodium or because I got too much? And then to complicate that, if you're not getting enough protein in your diet, and what I mean by that is all of the amino acids that you need in all the right amounts, you can then have a breakdown of your um, capillary beds, which then also leak fluid into your uh, interstitial spaces, which then ends up down around your lower legs, ankles, and feet. And so you need to make sure you're getting enough protein. And for me, that just means that I need to be eating, there's an easy way to do that as long as your body can handle it and your ideal and your approach to nutrition doesn't have any problem with animal-based food products. However, sometimes that makes it hard to. I find it hard for me to get as much protein as a lot of influencers or doctors or trainers would suggest is necessary. I mean, for me, I should be getting about 80 milligrams per day, which, quite frankly, I find kind of hard without having to eat too many eggs and too much meat, along with milk. I just, I don't know, my body, as I get older, it feels like I need to eat less. So, anyways, back to the having the fluid balance and the the electrolytes all in order. If you can always have your electrolytes in order, you're always going to be in a good place. And it's those electrolytes that are going to hold all of the hydration, all the water we need in all the right places, so that your skin and everything can be fully hydrated. Uh, the nervous system adds another layer where there's no pause, no moment where the system can be downshift. The body never receives a signal that it's safe. Everything stacks. Small stressors accumulate, and cortisol consistently remains elevated simply because there's no interruption. Even brief moments of slowing down, whether through controlled breathing, meditation, or quiet movement, can change that signal and allow the system to reset. And so, this is where, you know, like for my sister, Jenny, uh, she she does what's called transcendental meditation. I don't. I do, along with my mindfulness practices, I also do a lot of deep diaphragmatic breathing. I will come in here and I will lay down on my bed, I'll lay back on my pillow, and I will just breathe deeply, not using my chest, but my diaphragm and my belly breathing, if you will. And I only breathe in and out through my nose, so it's nice and slow. And it's restful. A lot of times I fall asleep momentarily, or I just go into a deep transcendental state, if you will. Um, and that's really important, is finding out what works for you. I mean, there are some people like my sister that thinks that TM is for everybody. Um, is it? Could it be? Sure. I'm not questioning or doubting it. I don't feel it's something for me at this point in my life. But brief moments of slowing down, whether through controlled breathing, meditation, quiet movement, those things can change that signal and allow the system to reset. Sleep ties, and then sleep is the most important part, I think, is it ties it all together. It's not just rest, it's recalibration. When sleep is disrupted, the entire cortisol rhythm shifts. The body starts the next day already behind, already compensating, and that pattern tends to repeat over and over again. There are also underlying factors that shape how efficiently this system runs. Vitamin C, for example, is heavily concentrated in the adrenal glands and is used during stress responses. When levels are sufficient, the body can mount and resolve a stress response cleanly. When there are not, the response tends to linger. It's less precise. Thyroid function plays a similar role by setting the pace of metabolism. When energy demand and supply don't match, cortisol fills in as backup. Ah, don't want that happening too much. So when you step back and look at all this together, a pattern emerges. The body is constantly assessing timing, energy, fluid balance, and demand. Light sets the timing, food provides the fuel, electrolytes maintain the internal environment, and thyroid sets the pace while vitamin C supports the process, and cortisol steps in whenever something doesn't align. Cortisol is the multi-purpose tool that fills in when one of these other things falls out of place. It is basically our body's equity moderator, if you will. It steps in to bring everything back to where it needs to be. However, that being said, you don't want to overuse the equity, um, or the equilibrium actuator, cortisol. The goal is not to suppress cortisol, it is to create the conditions where cortisol only needs to act briefly and effectively. When the inputs are stable, the signal becomes sharp and controlled instead of constant and prolonged. What people often interpret as chronic stress, in many cases, is simply the body doing its job in an environment that feels unpredictable. In other words, your body just wants to feel safe. It wants to feel like the world that it's in is predictable. It does not want surprise. It wants to wake up every morning to find the same thing. It wants to, and it's going to do whatever it has to do to push you into a place where you are being consistent with just whatever. If you get up at a certain time every day, don't fight it. Always do what you can to make sure that you're going to be consistent. And if you're going to make a change, be consistent in that change. Don't be waking up at 6 a.m. one day, 9 a.m. the next day, 10 a.m. the next day, 8 a.m. the next day, 7 a.m. You want to be consistent. Period. And so if you're somebody that has a hard time getting out of bed before 8:30 or 9 in the morning, don't plan on being asleep until after midnight. Period. Because you don't need more than 8 or 9 hours of sleep. But at the same time, if you have a hard time getting out of bed before then, don't force your body to do otherwise. If you have to because of work, start getting up at say 5 or let's just say 6 a.m. Make sure that you are in bed, and I know I'm gonna have to do a video on this at some point. 9 hours and 36 minutes before sunrise. That's a number that I came up with that is that what I believe is the best amount of time to be laying flat in your bed before you have to be up in the morning. So if you have to be up at 6 a.m., be in bed probably about 8:20 in the evening, which I know it sounds like it's early. And if you're an early riser like that during the summer, it's hard to go to bed when the sun's still up. But that's the kind of consistency and predictability that the body needs to function better. So if you change the environment, the signal changes with it. If you want to get cortisol into the place where it's not affecting you negatively, this is where we have to come in and we have to act very mechanistically to, I guess you could say, control that environment. Otherwise, our body's going to take over. It's going to turn on cortisol, and it's going to take over for you. So you can either, I guess you could say, man up and you know honor the mechanisms and do what the body needs you to do. If not, don't worry, the body's going to take care of it for you. But what's going to end up happening is you're going to be exposed to too much cortisol. And maybe I'll start off tomorrow or the next broadcast addressing what happens physiologically to us when our body is producing too much cortisol, because it's not a very good thing. Anyways, that being said, I am done for this evening. It is Saturday night, and that means popcorn. But before that, I need to go have myself a glass of orange juice, and I'm going to go take a walk in the neighborhood, because that's what I'm doing right now. It's too hot to get out for too much during the day, so I get out and walk about 2 miles in the morning and then 2 miles in the evening. Anyhow, I am Michael Loomis signing off from Chew Digest here in the virtual studio at youtube.com. I'll see you back here tomorrow, maybe the next day. It just depends. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do this on Monday because it's a busy day for me. So I will probably be back here tomorrow. It is going to be Sunday, and I'll see you then. And hasta la vista, baby.